Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, global markets reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me at the MarketSite studio in Times Square, New York City, we have Evan Van Hook. He's the Chief Sustainability Officer at Nasdaq-listed Honeywell to discuss the Honeywell Environmental Sustainability Index. It's great to see you as always, Evan. Welcome back to Trade Talks.
Wonderful to see you.
And this is the fourth quarterly installment. We've been covering this for a year now. Remind the audience of what the index is about.
Certainly. This is something that Honeywell started in October of 22. And essentially, it's a survey, a double-blind survey of about 750 people who spend their lives on the sustainability goals of their companies. So it's a unique perspective. I saw your interview with Rick Redding a couple of weeks ago. He's looking at it from the asset manager side of the house. This looks at it from the CSO side of the house. How is sustainability going, and what are their views of the future?
What is the index looking to measure?
What it's looking to measure, and I think that the CSO is an interesting sort of metric for this, because the CSO sort of pulls together all the information, and so their views, their sentiments are very important. And what it is looking at is, how are you doing on your sustainability measures? How have you done in the last 12 months? How does it look over the next 12 months? How does it look over up to, like, say, 2030? How optimistic are you? And then what's underlying that? Are you getting the money to achieve your goals? And are you seeing the technologies be available to achieve your goals? So it's really kind of, sustainability is largely driven by targets, and do we have the infrastructure in place to achieve them?
Tell us more about the methodology that's used. Are these all Honeywell customers?
Not at all. It's a double-blind survey of about 750, again, professionals in the sustainability area globally, all over the world. They have to have at least 1,000 employees, and the respondents have to spend basically their professional lives in sustainability. They have to be in leadership roles in sustainability, and that's the target audience, because we really do want to get a sense of, how it's going throughout the economy. Honeywell happens to market a lot in the sustainability area, so it's very interesting to us how everyone is seeing this area shaping up.
What were some of the interesting findings from this quarter survey?
Yeah, what I thought was really interesting, and actually this was somewhat consistent with the Redding interview, is there was concern with all of the geopolitical issues going on right now and the economic issues, that perhaps sustainability was going to drop off a bit in the corporate sort of radar screen. We're seeing that is absolutely not the case. Sustainability remains right at the top of corporate initiatives, and as I mentioned earlier, about 86% of companies that responded are increasing their budgets for sustainability. And in fact, about a third of them plan to increase it by a quarter to 50%, which is very significant. So that was the first thing that really hit me, that, wow, these geopolitical and financial issues are not derailing the sort of sustainability train. People are locked on and going. And then a second thing is that, of course, those budgets are great. That's what drives this. But there's a very significant shift this quarter towards technology. We really started out with a lot of, like, hey, let's change behaviors, let's turn off our lights and things like that. And now there's a real shift towards the technology, which I think is great for the economy, but that's also where you get those big reductions in carbon.
So is that really where you're seeing the priorities for the quarter are centered around technology? Are there any other priorities that stood out?
Well, of course, climate remains the dominant priority. The change in energy and energy efficiency and energy transition. But the other big thing that was very significant this quarter was significant increase in circularity as a focus. And what that says to me is that the companies have, and society in general, has built sort of the muscles through climate. There's a lot of infrastructure in place from the climate focus, but those muscles are now being turned to other issues. And I do think that means that sustainability is going to continue to drive into new areas. And circularity is so critical to a sustainable society.
How does this quarter compare to past quarters?
Yeah, well, first of all, quite a significant increase in the focus in technology over over process, and then a real bump up in the amount of investment that's going on in all categories. Now, what we're also seeing is some decrease or increase in concern over, am I going to make those 2030 goals? And I think that that kind of comes together. I think that people are, it's getting very real, 2030. And people are saying, where are the technologies? This is what I need to do. This is what I need to invest in. We need to certainly continue to drive improvements in permitting and things. But that was another thing that really jumped out. For the first time, we're seeing like, hey, we're getting a little worried. It's getting closer. We better get going. So,
well, these mandates and goals certainly are aggressive. Would you say overall the environment is optimistic?
I absolutely. When I say there's been a decrease, that's been a decrease from a very high level. In general, society is optimistic about being able to do this, which is a great thing.
Are there any significant variations in terms of corporate sustainability commitment among different geographies?
Well, that's a great question, and of course I have the global role, and so I spend a lot of my time in different areas, and we are, and all of our targets, of course, are global, but you do see regional differences. First of all, in what we call APAC, the broader Asia Pacific region, they are far and away more confident with how they have done in their recent targets, less so about the future. So there you sort of see them say, hey, I've implemented things and I'm really happy with how that's going. Very different in Latin America. They're somewhat less in terms of like, hey, how am I doing right now? But they're very optimistic about the future. And that might have some things to do with, for example, the biofuel industry is very strong in Latin America. And maybe they sort of see that and say, hey, we sort of know where we're going as a region for that. I haven't dug into exactly why, but that's one big disparity that you see. The other thing I think that's really interesting is you used to always say that Europe was sort of dominating. Right. And frankly, the United States is driving investment at a rate, equal to or greater than Europe now. So that's something I found interesting.
That is interesting. Tell us about Honeywell's qualifications for delivering this type of report.
Sure. It's, I'm very happy that we're doing it, and I think we're pretty uniquely qualified. We started our sustainability program way back in 2004, and there's not a lot of big manufacturing companies that can say that. We have, I always say it was like 6 knuckleheads in an office back then, and we were trying to figure it out, and we put it together, and we've already reduced our greenhouse gas intensity by more than 93%. We're a very diverse company. We probably have industrial conditions that match pretty much anything that you can see. So we've reduced in contexts that are sort of mirror the broader economy. And then also, right now, we did an analysis back in 21, and about 60% of our R&D and of our revenue goes to products that are improving environmental or social outcomes. So we not only have the experience ourselves for the last 2 decades, but we're really putting a lot of effort into innovating in this space. So we're both doing it internally, and we are really part of that green economy. So I think it makes us
And that's
qualified.
what I find so remarkable about Honeywell and other industrial conglomerates, just how technology and innovation, you don't think of it, front of the house, if you will, but really driving the green economy. To your point, what are some of the latest sustainability innovations coming out of Honeywell?
Sure. Well, with 60% of our R&D and our revenues, it's a lot. So I like to tend to think about it in terms of big categories. Sustainable aviation. We do a lot in that, both in our aviation business, but also in our PMT chemicals business. And that goes from everything from improving the performance of the plane itself, in terms of reducing weight in particular, but then also like navigation. If you take the plane in a straighter route or a less circuitous route, you are going to use less fuel. But then also the fuel that's put in. We're real leaders in sustainable aviation fuel, and what we've been developing lately is to really expand the feedstock that can go into SAF, or sustainable aviation fuel. So sustainable aviation is a big area for us. Another big area is the whole area of refrigerants, propellants, solvents. That is a major contributor to greenhouse gases, one of the largest. And we have innovated very aggressively in this area and developed what's called the HFO, or hydrofluoroolefin technology, which has a greenhouse gas potential of less than 1. So going from several thousand down to less than 1, major innovation. And that, really a suite of everything to do with the cold chain or else solvents. So that's a big area. Buildings. Buildings are about 30% of greenhouse gases globally. Honeywell has been a major player in buildings since the 19th century. So we're very embedded there. And now we're working with a lot of management systems to identify, control, monitor, improve the performance of buildings that are now connected to the cloud through our Forge system. So that's another big, big area. And I could name others, but I like to think about the big categories where we really have a right to participate.
All right, Evan, we appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks, and thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.